those people who are recording themselves already, if you're using Reaper, just shout, yo! Yeah, okay, there's a couple. And of those people that are recording themselves, if you're using any other DAW, just say, sorry, man.
Sorry.
All right, cool. So, so I know who I'm talking to. All right, so let's get started then. So I am here really to talk about, firstly, the history of Reaper accessibility and how we've kind of gotten to the stage that we're at now. And then I'm also going to run you through a few features of the accessibility extension that I think are really cool. So the history begins, I guess, with me getting very drunk after a recording session in a pub with a band and getting my bag stolen from under the table, which had my laptop in it. And at the time, I was running Pro Tools, and it was a very shaky passage of time for Pro Tools accessibility. When that happened, you couldn't run Pro Tools accessibly on current Apple hardware. And I had some sessions coming up in like a couple of days' time. And so I figured, okay, well, I guess I've got to learn a new DAW like pretty quickly. So I jumped into Sonar because that's what everybody was using. We're going back a fair way here. It would have been Sonar 8.5.3. So we're going back to like, I don't know, 2007, 2008, somewhere around there. Did the next few sessions with Sonar, got it done, didn't like it. And I just didn't feel like it was going to be my new home. And so a couple of days after that, I was at my day job, pootling about on the internet, looking busy. And I started seeing people talking about Reaper, and it was portrayed as kind of a tweaker's DAW. Like the idea was that everything about it was customizable. And so at the time, it was kind of portrayed as the DAW for people that have used other ones and didn't like any of them. And they just wanted to tweak it and tweak it and tweak it and get it to be exactly what they wanted. And that sounded interesting to me. And so I went onto the forum because that seemed pretty busy. And I stumbled across this Russian guy who was asking questions of the Reaper developers around accessibility. And he was trying to use Reaper's API to build an accessibility extension. So for anyone that doesn't know the term API, it stands for Application Programming Interface. And essentially it's a way of you communicating with software under the hood. So what this guy was trying to do was like a direct link from screen reader to Reaper and back again, like a bi-directional kind of form of communication that was API based rather than doing what the Sonar scripts had been doing, which was more kind of screen scraping and looking for objects on screen and recognizing positions, colors, that kind of stuff to gather the information. Now the communication between that guy and the developers wasn't going very smoothly at the time, partly because the Russian guy who was asking the questions didn't speak any English, and also so he was talking through a translator, and they weren't as good as they are now back then. And also, I think part of the issue was just like no one had ever done it before, and I don't think the developer that he was talking to had really sort of designed the API with that in mind. I wasn't quite grasping what the guy was trying to do. So I jumped into that conversation on the forum because I figured I can probably help like explain a few things about screen reader tech and might be able to speed things along a little bit. Ended up talking to the Russian guy, and we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and eventually what he was working on became Reaccess, which might be a name that some of you would have heard. And that was the first Reaper accessibility extension. And essentially how that project rolled was he would do all of the development. Primarily, it would be done in Russian. And then he'd send test builds over to me, and I would sit and poke around and try my best to figure out what was going on, and then sending back English translations of stuff. Now, again, I don't speak a word of Russian, so at the time it was all just like auto translators, and then looking at it and kind of looking at the results and kind of going, I think this is what it's trying to say. So it was pretty cumbersome, but we got some good stuff done. Now, one thing that always irked me about Reaccess was that it was closed source, and the guy who was developing was very, very, very guarded. Like right from the early stages, we had people who were coming forward and getting in touch and saying, "Hey, this looks really cool. I want to contribute." And these were people like developers, scripters with some really well established track records, and this guy just wasn't up for collaborating. And I sensed that might be a problem. And unfortunately, my hunch was correct, because a couple of years after Reaccess had kind of been released into the wild and picked up some fairly quick adoption, I would say, the guy just vanished. Just like literally in a puff of smoke. No one heard from him for years. Now, you don't need to worry about him. He's back, and he does now have another Reaper extension. But essentially, during that period where he was off doing whatever he was doing, I still don't know where he went, we were left a bit high and dry, because one of the things about Reaper is this insane speed of development and evolution. And nowadays, because we've got a good relationship with the developers, I'll talk more about that in a bit, that's like a massive plus in our favor. And I'll give you some examples of that later on. But at the time, it was like, Reaper's evolving, but the accessibility is standing still. And with it being closed, with Reaccess being closed source, there basically was nothing we could do about it. I mean, so it kind of looked like a dead end. But by this point, I'd invested a fair bit of time and effort into learning the DAW. And I loved the speed, the customizability, the fact that it would run on basically anything, the fact that it was portable. And I was already quite invested in kind of the community side of things that had sprung up around it as well. And so I just kind of kept using it. And, every now and again, something else would break, and either me or somebody else would find a workaround, and then we'd share it in the community, and that would be like the new way of doing things. And then something else would break, and we'd find another workaround, and then the workarounds started breaking, and we were finding workarounds for the workarounds. And eventually it got to a point where it's like, okay, cool, I don't know if I can trust this thing in a session anymore. And so I scratched my head for a bit and kind of just wrote down an ideal plan of what would replace Reaccess. And for me, it would be open source, so that it would be future-proofed for this situation reoccurring. Now, it's kind of not as easy as to say, well, if it's open source, anyone can just step in and do it. Yeah, okay, that's true, but you've still got to find the person, right? You've still got to find the developer that's A, capable, B, interested, and C, has the time or a way of paying for their time if they don't have the spare time. So no mean feat, but the point is that even if the next person that works on the extension was to need to put it down, go off, do something else, or was to disappear in a puff of smoke again, the point is there's a more robust recovery there that is possible than starting from scratch. I really wanted it to be cross-platform as well because Reaper is. Now, at the time, it was cross-platform Windows and Mac. There's a Linux variant now as well, which unfortunately isn't accessible yet. But so at the time, Windows and Mac for the accessibility extension was really important to me. Partly because people had already kind of made a start with using Reaper on Mac, but they were doing some really hacky stuff to use it. And it was this weird segmentation thing that was happening in the community where, because the approaches were so different, Windows folks couldn't answer Mac folk questions, and Mac folk couldn't really help Windows folks along. And I wanted a way of kind of shoring that up as the community was growing. So I scouted around and found a good open source developer. Good's not fair. Found a genius. So I got in touch with Jamie Tay, which, if anyone doesn't know him, he was co-lead developer and co-founder of MV Access, the good folks that bring us MVDA. And he was still at MV Access at the time. That was his full-time gig. And I found that he was also a little bit disenfranchised with the way things were panning out with Sonar. And it took a few tries, but eventually I twisted his arm into checking out the Reaper API, and kind of put it to him that if he was interested in developing a cross-platform open source extension, I would go off and try and raise some funding for it. And that's what happened. And Jamie being Jamie, by the time I sort of researched like where I could get some funding from, written some applications and that kind of stuff, I had a proof of concept, which was just like a really early bare bones version of OSARA for Windows. But it worked, and it did like most of the important things that Reaccess had been doing. So my pitch for funding was basically I would take Reaper into a meeting, put it in front of some folks that had money to share, and use a project a little bit with OSARA, and then stop running OSARA and show them all the things that I couldn't do. And it worked. We got some funding. We budgeted for a bunch of hours for Windows development, bunch of hours for Mac development. Ran hideously over both of those hours. Now, luckily, MV Access, Jamie's employer, were super excited about OSARA. So they kind of let him carry on working on that during work time, even after the funding had expired, which huge. I don't know if not sure if we'd be here today talking about it if that hadn't happened. And so ever since then, I've just been kind of the person that sort of, I don't know what to call it. It's not, I don't manage the project exactly. Like, I answer a lot of questions about it most days. I'm very sort of present in the community. Occasionally I kind of get ideas of like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if this person and this person met for a conversation? And I just kind of nudge people together and start conversations going. And I do that sort of stuff. In more recent times, I've started contributing a little bit of code to OSARA as well. It's not pretty. I'm not good at it yet. It's just like sheer force of will. That I don't know. I've always wanted to be able to get more involved with like the nuts and bolts of it. And I'm getting to a point now where I can contribute stuff that kind of, resolves a few bottlenecks that we've had in the project. But essentially, The cool thing about OSARA is that the open source thing has proven to be a massive asset for us. So everything we do is open. You can go look at absolutely anything that we work on over on GitHub, which is like a site, like a development tracker. And so you can see what I'm working on. You can see what Jamie's working on. Other people have come forward. We've got a guy over in the Netherlands called Leonard de Rooster, who does like really kind of under the hood type stuff that, you know, you don't really see a new feature happen from a lot of Leonard's work, but everything works better once Leonard's out at it. We've got another guy up in Scotland called Robbie Murray, who appeared and just basically the bottleneck type stuff that I was hoping to resolve. Robbie kind of has come forward, and because he's already a more experienced developer than me, he's been doing a lot of that work while it turns out it's taken me quite a lot longer to learn C++ than I thought it was going to. So we've got a bunch of contributors. There's Jamie is over in Australia. Vic Saran, who you might know from JSonar project. He contributed to early stuff to the Mac port. We got a guy in Germany. People all over the world. And adoption has been like huge, especially in recent times now that we're translatable. And again, translation is all crowdsourced. And so this year has been the first year where there's branches of the Reaper community now around accessibility where I don't know what's going on because I can't speak the language. And so it's grown like really, really fast in the last couple of years, and it's still growing. The community side of it is, again, something fairly unique, I think, around the accessible stuff, just in terms of like how engaged everybody is. There's a ton of collaboration that happens. There's people from all over the world, from different backgrounds, different cultures, blah, 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 collaborating, helping each other, that kind of stuff. And I think one thing that's a real asset for us is the amount of community-generated resources as well. So just to give you a quick overview, my newest thing is a project called Reaper Made Easy, which is sponsored by the good folks at the Global Voice. And the idea of that is they pay me and a couple of other people that I've brought in to produce training resources, run live streams, that kind of stuff. And they pay us up front to do it, right? So at that point, anyone can have it for free that needs it. Now, that project has been going for probably about a year or so. And I would say the content that we've been making is like top notch. I'm really, really proud of it. If you want to go have a look at any of that stuff, you can go to theglobalvoice.info/Reaper. In terms of the content, we're doing really, really well. In terms of management of the project, I am a huge bottleneck, and this is the next thing that I really need to resolve. I've just bitten off a bit more than I can chew, basically. So at this point, I've got a really good editor that I work really well with for the live streams and that kind of stuff. I need to find someone that's going to help me kind of coordinate sessions to make sure they happen more often. Ideally, I need to find someone that's a bit better with web content than I am. So if you're hearing this and that's you, come and have a chat. So I think that's probably enough talk for now. I'm going to root my screen reader for you, and I'm just going to show you a little bit of how OSARA works in practice. So give me a second. All right, you should be hearing screen reader now, yeah?
Yeah, I can hear that.
Cool. I'll slow it down a bit for you.
Rate 5.
Oh, not that much.
Rate 20.
That okay for everybody?
That's great.
Hopefully
yeah.
that's a yes.
Thanks.
Cool. All right.
Zoom meeting.
So
Zoom 0.
I am in a Reaper project, and we can do things like move between tracks with up and down arrows.
Filthy Synth, FX, Surge XT, Head Crusher.
So that track is called Filthy Synth, and you heard it say effects, and tells me what effects are on the track as well, which was Surge XT, which is a wicked open source accessible synth,
Sonia
and
Wilkie has left.
Head Crusher, which I will demonstrate for you later. It's a sort of disgust maker. They call it a saturator, but it's really horrible. So we can move between tracks with up and down arrows. We can also, if I move to a different track now.
End of folder solo 31 items, FX, now 808.
Okay, so that time you heard end of folder, which hints that we've also got access to folders. I'll show you that in a second. And you heard the track was called solo, and you heard 31 items. So basically in Reaper, whenever you record something onto a track, whether it's audio, MIDI, whatever, it's stored as an item, right? And so even though this solo was only one take initially, I've sliced it, diced it, made a couple of edits, just fixed a little bit of tuning here, a little bit of timing there, that kind of stuff, and we end up with 31 items. But because OSARA gives us plenty of info on, the position of items, the length of them, the pitch of them, the volume of them, all of that stuff is easily reportable via the screen reader. If I play this solo to you now,
One solo.
it doesn't sound like there's 31 edits. Sounds like this. So it's all pretty smooth, right? And I mean, I would say we can edit. Well, I've done it. Edited like in a pace alongside sighted folks in a production team, and I can keep pace with them fine. Now, it's not reasonable to say that you're just going to pick up Reaper on day one and that's going to happen, because as with any of these things, there's a lot of practice involved, partly to learn the keystrokes, partly to learn the tricks of the software, mostly I would say to develop your sensibilities, but the point is it does come. So let's have a look at one of the big things that we do with OSARA is we try to make it nice and customizable in terms of how much information your screen reader is going to give you and when. So if I just hit Control F12 and go into the OSARA configuration dialog,
OSARA configuration
and quick whip through some of these options. So the first one,
report position when scrubbing, checkbox not checked, Alt plus S,
is report position when scrubbing. So in Reaper, you can scrub backwards and forwards through the audio, which is essentially just like moving through the audio really slowly. And it's useful to get yourself queued up for like really tight edits and that kind of thing. Now, I don't have this turned on, so when I scrub, I get noises like that, and I don't get any speech. But if it was useful for me to know where I am in the beat, in the bar, whatever time reference I'm using, whether it's bars and beats, minutes and seconds, hours, minutes, seconds, frames, whatever, they're all supported. If I turn on scrub,
checked, 0,
and then I move again,
wow, 100, 75%,
okay,
73%, 71, from Sophia Alex, 66%, 63%, 61%.
And so you can hear it's telling me where I'm landing in the beat as I move. That's too much speech for me, so I'm going to turn it back off.
Not checked.
And the next option,
report time movement during playback / recording, checkbox not checked,
is report time movement during playback. This one's nice and quick to demonstrate.
Checked.
So if we turn it on,
01 importing stems
and I play this tune,
intro,
and then just like skip forward bar by bar, you'll hear the screen readers chatting away, telling us bar by bar at the same time. So, it's chatting away as I'm skipping through and telling me what bar I'm on. Again, too much speech for me. So I turn it off.
OSARA, report full time, report time, not checked. 0,
And so
bar,
if I
intro,
do that same move with this turned off, I can just skip around and hear where I am based on context. But I've got a keystroke Control-Shift-J or Command-Shift-J over on the Mac to tell me exactly where I am at any given time. So when I do need to know, that information is still only one keystroke away. For example, at the moment, I am
bar 16 beat 269% paused.
at bar 16 beat to 69% and transport is paused. And if I press twice quickly,
0 minutes 26.440 seconds paused.
I can also get it in minutes and seconds. And because Reaper is Reaper and everything's customizable, those are just the two time references that I've chosen. There are a bunch of others, and you can choose which one is your primary, i.e. one press of that keystroke, and which one is your secondary, i.e. two presses.
Bar 1,
Okay.
OSARA, report full time movement commands checkbox not
Report full time for time movement commands. So let me show you how this one works. This is really cool.
checked. 0,
And this gets into a concept that we're very keen on, which is like dynamically reporting only the stuff that you need to know. So with this turned on, report full commands.
bar 1,
Let's say I went to, I don't know,
selection
bar
1,
1, beat 1, 50%.
from Francisco,
Right? Now, if I skip forward a bar from there with report full time on,
bar 2 beat 150%,
and then if I skip forward a beat,
bar 2 beat 250%,
so you're hearing the full time readout every time you move. I don't like that. I like our dynamic style of reporting. So let me turn that off.
OSARA, report full time movement not checked. 0,
Okay. Now this is way cooler
bar
to me anyway, because it gives me the same info, but with less speech verbosity. So I'm going to start from the same place again. Bar 1, beat 1, 50% of the beat. Okay, now if I skip forward a bar from here,
bar 30,
oopsie, I typed in the wrong bar.
so
Hang on.
1,
Uh,
0, 1, bar 1 beat 150%,
There we go. That's the starting point I meant. Right, so if I skip forward a bar from here,
bar 2,
it only tells me the bar has changed because that's the only thing that has changed. Look, we're at bar 2, beat 1, 50% still.
bar 2 beat 150% paused,
Okay, and if I skip forward a beat,
beat 2,
only tells me the beat because that's the only thing that changed. Now, the interesting thing is that if I go a couple more beats forward,
beat 4,
so now I'm at bar 2, beat 450. When I cross a bar line,
bar 3 beat 1,
now it tells me the bar and the beat because that's changed. It doesn't tell me the percentage because
bar 3 beat 150% paused,
we're still at 50%. So in combination with that keystrokes a report on demand, I find that to be a really productive way of keeping track of time without hearing unnecessary blither coming from my screen reader, stuff that, you know, I'm already aware of.
bar 1,
Let's have a look at the next
Those are-
option. I'm going to skip over a couple of these, but we're going to do mum, I think, because we've got time.
report full time move relative to the play cursor for time movement commands during play,
Move relative to the play cursor. Okay.
not checked, 0,
This one is also really cool. And this is an instance where we're overriding, or at least we're giving you an option to override Reaper's default behavior, which initially we didn't do, but it was one of those, like, so many people requested it type features that that it ended up happening. So in Reaper, there's two cursors. There's the edit cursor and there's the play cursor.
Brian
Now,
has joined the meeting alert,
if I skip to,
intro marker bar 5,
I don't know, let's say bar 5, right? If I start playing from here, my play cursor is going to start zipping along the timeline. It's going to go, you know, bar 5, beat 1, 2, 3, 4, bar 6, beat 1, 2, 3, 4, bar 7. But the edit cursor stays where I first press play until I tell it to do something else. And so let me just give you an
Alex
example
Kozyshev has left.
of how this works. I'm just going to play for a bit, and then after I've played for a bit, I'm going to hit the command to jump forward one beat, and let's see what happens. So we've got bar 5, bar 6, bar 7, bar 8, jump forward a beat. And now if I read where I am,
bar 5 beat 20% stopped,
even though I hit that command when I played at like bar 9, what it's done is snapped back to the edit cursor position and jumped a beat forward from there instead. Now that's Reaper's default behavior,
Bar 1.
and there are times when it's useful, but mostly it's not very intuitive. So what OSARA does
OSARA.
is it gives you this option.
Move relative to the play cursor for time movement commands during playback checkbox not.
Move relative to the play cursor. Remember, that's the one that's moving along when you're listening.
Checked. 0.
So let's check that
Intro.
and do the same example again. So we've got bar 5, bar 6, bar 7, bar 8, jumping forward a beat, and
Bar 8 beat 4 27% stopped.
there we go. Now it's jumping relative to the thing that I most recently heard. And I find that to be a lot more intuitive. So I'm going to leave that one set like that because I like it.
OSARA.
What else we got?
Report markers during playback checkbox not checked.
Oh, this one's cool.
Move relative to the play.
Report markers during playback. So
Checked.
I'm going to turn this on.
0 1.
So in Reaper, you can have project markers. So for example, if I skip through the markers that I've got in this project,
Intro marker bar 5.
I've got intro,
Pre-verse 1 marker bar 21.
pre-verse 1,
Verse 1 marker bar.
verse 1,
Pre-chorus marker bar 4.
pre-chorus,
Chorus 1 marker.
chorus 1, etc., etc. And I can jump to those markers super quick. So if I want to hear the second chorus, for example,
Chorus 2 marker. Chorus 2 marker.
I'm there, one keystroke. Now, this setting, the most recent one we looked at in the OSARA config dialog, it dictates whether those markers are reported as the project is playing. And one example where I've used this is when I'm recording stuff that I'm not super familiar with yet, and I want to leave myself some little notes in the project. So for example,
Bar 1.
if we were to go to pre-verse 2,
Chorus 1 marker bar. Post-chorus marker. Pre-verse.
there it is. Let's just have a listen to this for a second.
Pre-verse 2 marker.
Okay, so we've got this bit, and then we've got like a 4 on the floor kick thing, and then we've got
Verse 2 marker.
like a half-time China groove, right? So there's a lot going on there in a fairly short space of time if you're that drummer and you're not really familiar with this song yet. So what we could do
Beat 2.
is we could put a project marker in this little gap,
marker.
and we could call it, say, I don't know,
4.
4 on the floor kick, Tom Flams,
Flap.
half-time
Time.
China.
0 1.
And now listen to this.
Pre-chorus marker bar 45 beat 1. Chorus 1 marker. Post-chorus marker. Pre-verse 2
I'm just going to give it a little bit of context, and you can listen to how OSARA reports this as the project is playing.
Bass. Pre-verse 2 marker. 4 on the floor kick. Tom Flams. Half-time China marker.
And I've got my cues to start doing 4 on the floor kick and some Tom Flams
Verse 2 marker.
and half-time China groove.
Has joined the meeting now.
So there's plenty of other uses for this as well. I've seen people use it to cue lyrics when they're performing to backing tracks, that kind of thing. And because you can choose where the markers are placed exactly, it can be very context sensitive if you need it to be. I'm going to move to that marker that I just added.
Post-chorus marker. Pre-verse 2 marker bar
Where
73.
is it?
4 on the floor kick. Tom.
And delete it.
Marker delete.
And that brings me on to another thing about Reaper and OSARA. Everything is context sensitive, or at least the vast majority of things. So if you want to act on something, like if you want to see context menu options for it, for example, you move to it, hit your context menu key. If you move to something else, you'll get a completely different set of options. And the same is true for deletion. Like I moved to that marker that I wanted to get rid of and just hit delete. If I'd have moved to a track instead and hit delete, I would have got rid of that track that I'd moved to. So that context sensitivity is super nice because it means you don't need to remember, 5 different deletion keystrokes for tracks, items, markers, I don't know, envelope points. There's any number of things that you can delete. But in the vast majority of cases, just the delete key does it. The trick is to move to the thing that you want to delete first. Okay, let's take a look.
Move report transport state. Play. Report markers during. Not checked.
Turn that back off because that's going to drive me mad.
Report,
report transport state.
checked.
This is another
0.
big verbosity difference. So we're turned on, which it is by default. If I hit play, screen reader tells me
Play.
And if I hit pause,
Pause.
it tells me pause. And if I hit stop again,
Play. Stop.
there you go. And if I hit record, it will also tell me record. Again, too much speech for me. I get why it's useful to some folks, but I don't like it. So I turn it off.
OSARA. Report markers during playback checkbox not report transport state not checked. 0.
And the same deal as the last things I've turned off, we do still have that information available on a key press. So for example, now I'm going to hit play. Doesn't tell me. I'm going to pause. And, if I now go off the phone, whatever, come back and I can't remember what state my transport is in, I can just do that Control-Shift-J keystroke.
Bar 2 beat 242% paused.
Tells me where I am and what the transport is doing. So I can still get that information quick sharp when I want it, but I don't have to hear it when I don't need it.
Bar 1. OSARA.
Let's see, nearly at the end of the...
Report FX when moving to track / report MIDI notes in MIDI editor
Oh,
checkbox
yeah,
checked.
okay.
Report track numbers checkbox checked.
This is useful. Report track numbers.
0 1.
So this just gives you a number for the track. So for example, that solo that we listened to
40 end of folder solo 31 items. FX 9.
is track 40. So the track number comes before the track name. The item count on the track comes afterwards. And another concept of OSARA is that if something doesn't exist, we don't waste your time telling you about it. So for example, if I move to Filthy Synth,
41 filthy synth. FX.
it doesn't tell us a count of items because there aren't any on that track at the moment. We're going to record one in a minute. So track numbers, super useful. They're also useful when you're moving and you group things into folders, which I tend to do a lot. So if I show you an example of that.
1 open folder D, 2 parallel compress.
So
3 4 closed folder kick sum.
if I move to this folder, track 4 is a closed folder, kick sum. Okay. So if I move down one click of down arrow from here.
7 closed folder snare sum.
Aha. So we've moved to next closed folder, which is the snare sum. And did you notice it went from 4 to 7? So that tells me roughly how many things are in that folder. And if I pop open the kick sum folder,
Open.
we can see what's there.
5 kick.
So there's the kick.
6 end of folder kick sub.
And there's the kick sub, and that's the end of folder. So for anyone that's not spent much time around drums,
Intro.
those are just two mic perspectives.
5.
So the mic inside the kick sounds like this. Whereas
Unsoloed. 6 end of folder.
the kick sub sounds like this. And then if you put them both together, you get the best of both worlds.
All tracks.
It's got that clickiness of the kick that cuts through the guitars, but it's also got that kind of doof, doof sort of weight to it.
OSARA configuration.
Let me just check.
Report MIDI in MIDI edit. Report FX when moving to tracks / takes. Report track numbers checkbox checked all.
I'm going to turn that off because I don't like it.
Report FX when moving to.
Report effects when moving to tracks / takes. That one just does what it says on the tin. And you've heard it doing that a couple of times. If you've got effects on a track or a take, when you move to it, OSARA will tell you, which is how earlier on it reported that I've got Surge XT and Head Crusher on that synth track that I haven't used yet. If you don't want to hear that information, turn this checkbox off and you'll just get your track names or your track numbers and names if you like that, and you won't be told about the effects. But you can still go into the effects window and find out what's there by reading the FX chain list.
Report MIDI notes in MIDI editor checked all.
Run a little bit short on time, so I'm going to skip through these last couple quickly. Report notes in the MIDI editor. This will tell you whether notes are present and how many notes as you're moving, but we've also got note previews, which happen by default. So yeah, actually, I'll show you, anyone that's interested, I'll show them how the MIDI editor works later this afternoon. Come and see me.
Report changes made via control surfaces checkbox not checked.
And this is the last one. Report changes made via control surfaces. I'm probably not going to have a service with me this afternoon to demonstrate it, but essentially this reports changes made on a control surface. Now, at the moment, this is still, I mean, it's stable enough to use, but it's not as fleshed out as it's eventually, hopefully, going to be. It does tell you things like track volumes, mutes, solos, pans, envelope types, loads of stuff. I think probably the most robust way of using it at the moment is in combination with another open source project called Control Surface Integrator, which is a mainstream project, but some dudes have gotten control surfaces, and again, CSI, Control Surface Integrator, is all open source. So the blind and visually impaired folks that have got control surfaces have been collaborating and writing zone files and layouts and all the stuff that project needs with speech incorporated, because thanks to one of those nudging people together type conversations, that project CSI can now communicate bidirectionally with OSARA directly. So that's probably the way of getting the most feedback from a control surface, is OSARA in combination with the CSI project. And right now, it's all a little bit nuts and boltsy to set up. It is a little bit involved, but there's a really good community for it. Not a ton of people yet, but everybody that's there is super helpful. And if anybody wants to join that group, it would be VICSI at groups.io. Oh, my bad. You need a subscribe thing, don't you? So VICSI plus subscribe at groups.io to join that group if you want to ask questions, find out about what's happening. So that brings us to the end of the OSARA configuration dialogue, and hopefully that gives you kind of an idea of like how flexible just the screen reader aspects of it are. And I haven't even really touched on the flexibility of Reaper itself yet. What I thought it might be cool to do is just watch a recording happen. So one of the things that we provide with OSARA is a feature called Peak Watcher. And so if I go to my
defeating solo effect
me track, which is how you're hearing me, and you heard a couple of things there when I moved to it. You heard that it was armed, which means ready to record, passing signal. You had solo defeat as well. That's useful because it means when I solo any other track, my vocal comes along with it and you don't lose the ability to hear me. So if I invoke Peak Watcher on this track,
context menu, first watcher, not
and we've got two watchers. We've got first and second watcher. Reason being is sometimes it's useful to monitor the track that you're recording onto, but also monitor your master track. But it doesn't have to be that usage. You can just monitor two tracks. You can do one. You can use one for the track recording level, second watcher for, I don't know, gain reduction on a compressor, for example. It's all super configurable.
Second, first.
But for now,
Peak Watcher track.
I'm just going to do first Peak Watcher and just show you how this works with my vocal that's through Reaper at the moment.
Level type, combo box peak dB collapsed.
So we're going to monitor peak.
Notify automatically for channels. Grouping. One checkbox checked.
I want to hear for channel 1.
2 check. Not checked.
I don't need to hear for channel 2 because this is just a mono mic.
When level reaches, edit Alt plus L selected 0.00.
Okay, and I just want Peak Watcher to tell me when I reach a specific level. So let's say -5.
Hold level. Grouping. Until reset radio button checked Alt.
And I can control how long that level gets held for until reset.
4. MS radio button.
I'm going to hold for a specific amount of milliseconds.
Edit blank.
I'm just going to hold for 1000 milliseconds a second.
Reset button.
And then the meter will reset.
OK button. First chan 5.
Okay.
First chan -2.2.
So now this is working. I'm talking kind of quietly. It's not telling me anything because I'm below -5. And then if I get a bit louder.
First chan -3.7.
Oh, -3.7. Check.
First chan 1.9.
Oh.
First chan 0.4.
There you go. I shot over, when I did the check, I shot over 0 dB. Very bad. And so this is with Peak Watcher announcing automatically, which is super useful if you're recording yourself. But there's also a mode which is easy to configure where you can just get that
First
information.
chan -4.4.
Let me turn this off. It's annoying.
Contact first watcher. Peak disabled. 0.
Disable. There's also a mode where you can request that information on demand and reset the meter on demand as well, which is more what I would use if I was recording somebody else and I could have my hands on the keyboard the whole time. But the mode where it announces stuff for you automatically is super useful if you're trying to play an instrument and record yourself, for example. We just monitored peak just then, which is useful if you're recording a signal, but if you're more into mixing and mastering and that kind of stuff and you don't do much recording, we can also monitor a bunch of different useful units. So we can do LUFS integrated, RMS, we can do gain reduction of compressors or any other type of effect that
Alex
supports
Kozasiuk has left
a
the meeting
certain...
alert.
Oops, sorry about that, bit of screen reader bleed. Yeah, we can do gain reduction for any effects that support a certain API, which is quite a lot of them. All of the Waves compressors do, for example. All the Reaper stock effects do as well. So yeah, Peak Watcher, super useful tool. So I think what I'm going to do is
Filthy synth.
super quickly just show you the parameters view by tweaking this synth. So
Armed.
I'm going to arm it so you can hear it.
FX.
And
Remove. List 1.
the synth patch
Bypass.
that came from Surge sounded like this originally. So, you know, not super inspiring. But bearing in mind this is a horrible, heavy sort of track,
Active.
I slapped Head Crusher on it, which is a super cheap saturator, sometimes goes free as well, and turned it into this,
Alex Kozasiuk has joined the meeting.
which is absolutely disgusting, but trust me, it's going to sound good in context. And the way I was able to do that
0.
is in the OSARA parameters dialog.
Context met 2 head crush FX parameter.
And so I get to that by doing P on the track or take that has got the effect that I want to view the parameters of on it. And now I can see all of the controls for this saturator. So I've got, for example,
Low cut 0.
low cut,
High cut 1.
high cut,
Tone 2.
tone,
Drive 3.
drive. So let's say,
Value slider 35.9.
okay, so that's at 35.9. Let's say that's a little bit too much drive. Let's just back this slider off a bit.
Set fit 13.9.
And now, so it's still saturating a little bit when you hold it down, but way less drive.
23. 29.
I'm gonna go-
35. 39.
I'm going to go back to where I was roughly and a little bit more.
Parameter. Alex Kozasiuk.
We can move back to the parameters list and we've got other stuff.
Output 4.
Output,
High cut Q 5.
high cut
Low cut
Q,
Q. Crush 7.
crush,
Assassinate 8.
assassinate. I've got crush turned on, I think.
Value slider on.
Yeah, this sounds like crush.
Brian
Assassinate
has
was,
left the
assassinate was a little bit too much, even for me.
01 importing.
And so now I've kind of shaped my sound and gotten it to be what I want it to be. And to be clear, this is running off MIDI. All I've done is stick a saturator after the synth. And Surge XT itself is amazingly accessible. So if you were smarter than me with synths, you could probably do this dirt stuff in the Surge interface because it also has a bunch of saturation effects and that kind of thing. But I'm primarily an audio person. So I did muck around with Surge a little bit and then I went, nah, I can do this quicker with an audio effect. And the point I'm trying to make is that you can combine them and that's super powerful. So let's say I wanted to record a little synth solo.
Pre-verse 2 marker bar.
I'm going to jump to
Pre-chorus 2 marker bar 97. Chorus. Breakdown marker bar 121.
breakdown. I want to put a little synth solo over this riff quickly. So let's just have a little listen to the riff on its own. Yeah, pretty horrible. But we can make it nastier with a synth. And I kind of feel like it needs something that's like root notey, just simple. To kind of anchor that down, 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 like to anchor where the actual center of the riff is, because it's so kind of dirty and bendy. So I'm in position. I'm at the start of this riff. I did that by moving to the marker. And then because I'm recording myself, I want a little bit of what we call pre-roll, which is kind of like a count-in, except you hear the project during the count-in.
Pre-roll on.
So turn that on with one keystroke, and OSARA tells me that it's on. Thank you very much. And now if I hit record, let's see what comes out. There you go. So we've got our take.
140.
And now I can select that item that we just recorded. I can open the MIDI editor if I want to tweak any of that.
MIDI take. 41 filthy synth.
And as I move through the notes, ooh, that isn't working.
01 import. Defeating filthy synth 1 item. FX. 141. 140.
And I'm not sure why.
MIDI take.
Yes I am.
MIDI view.
Here we go. My bad.
Bar 124. Bar 100. Bar 100. Bar 100. 1 note.
So I can move through these notes one at a time. I can change any of them. So I don't know, for example, where we did that.
Bar 100. Bar 100.
Where was it?
Bar 100.
Where I did like the major.
Bar 1. Bar 1.
Yeah, that's C sharp, for example. We could transpose that and make it an E to make it a bit less weird if we wanted to.
C5, C sharp, D sharp, D5.
Yeah, so now it would go.
Bar 1.
So we've changed that third note of the part, and we can tweak note pitch, length, velocity, like how hard the key is pressed. We can also do stuff like CC curves and some pretty advanced stuff, all accessibly inside the MIDI editor.
01.
There's a lot more to cover with the MIDI editing stuff. Like I said, if anybody wants to see more and have a poke at it, come and see me this afternoon. How am I doing for time, Alex?
We've just got sort of 5 minutes or so left, Scott. So it might be a good.
All right, let's do questions.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks so much.
Anybody got any questions?
Yeah, really enjoyed hearing you work there, and it's a fantastic example of. I guess you're a power user, Scott, but a fantastic example of working very efficiently using the screen reader interaction modality. So that's great to see. So yeah, I'd just like to open it out to the audience, both here and also online, if there's any questions at all. So Maya, what would you like to ask? So yes, Maya is just asking about the Peak Watcher and wondering if it was integrated into OSARA or if it's a separate edition that needs to be installed.
No, yeah, Peak. I maybe should have been clear about what's a Reaper feature and what's an OSARA feature. So Peak Watcher is an OSARA feature, and all of the customizations that I've gone over today, they're all OSARA features. They're all inside one dialog, like one place. You hit Control F12 to get to all of those customizations on Windows, Command F12 on Mac. Peak Watcher, move to the thing that you want to watch, and that is Alt W on Windows or Option W on Mac, and you can configure things from there.
That's great. Thanks, Scott. And Andre, did you have a question as well?
Oh, hello. Scott, hi, long time.
Hey, man.
I come from the land of sorry, but I bought Reaper, right? Because I do want to learn it, and I'm having a really hard time wrapping my head around stuff that I can do, because I think this is the problem. It's hard to get out of a particular mindset. So what I want to know, and you showed me something really, really special in the beginning, was that the announcement of the bars was, I paused it, like I had a project open in Reaper, I opened a bunch of WAV files, and I paused it, and I didn't realize it was not like at the beginning of the beat. So when I moved forward by beat, Logic rounds it back to the beat, which is maybe good or bad, depending on how you look at it. But when I was fast forwarding, it wasn't going to the beginning of the beat. So how do I get back to a beginning of a bar or beat without hitting W to rewind it to the total beginning?
So Alt Home on Windows or Option Home on Mac takes you to the beginning of the current bar.
Thank you.
Option End or Alt End, depending on what OS you're on, that jumps you to the beginning of the next bar.
That's it. That's the one. Thank you. That's bugging me.
That's great, Scott. You're obviously a wealth of
and
knowledge.
I think, actually, dude, sorry, just quickly, Andre,
Yeah.
I think in preferences somewhere, don't ask me where, I think there's a thing that snaps to the beginning of bars automatically when they change. I can try and find it for you. Hit me up on Twitter if I forget.
I'll check with you this afternoon.
Yeah, cool. I'll try and figure it out.
That's great. Thanks, Andre. Thanks, Scott. Any further questions at all? In that case, so I've got a question for you, Scott. So you mentioned about your sort of endeavours in learning C++ and sort of contributing to the coding of OSARA. I just wonder if you could speak a little bit about the accessibility of IDEs, of sort of programming environments, and how you found that experience.
Well, so I haven't dived particularly deep into IDEs. I write most of my stuff in Notepad++.
Okay.
More recently, I've dabbled a little bit with the latest release of what's the thing called?
Desktop list. Visual Studio Code 17.
That Visual Studio Code. Just because a couple of other people that also contribute more regularly than I do to OSARA, they all seem to be using it, and apparently the accessibility is pretty good in the latest version. So I've been dabbling with it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, really for me, like NVDA's code indentations have been super helpful because I don't have a braille display here. I think I would enjoy coding with a braille display
From
more.
Francisco Schroeder to everyone.
Probably.
Do put questions.
Someone's just asking if you put questions in the Zoom chat. Yes, you do. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said in the talk, man, my coding experience so far has just been like sheer force of will. I'm not good at it by any stretch yet. So I wouldn't take anything that I say on it as like an authority. But yeah, it's doable. Whether you get like all the really fancy stuff being accessible in VS Code, I don't know. Haven't really dived into it. But here, Notepad++ has been good, and VS Code seems like it's more powerful. And from what I've seen, the accessibility has been pretty good so far.
That's great. Thanks, Scott. Brian, did you have a question?
Thanks very much. Absolutely fascinating. Does it make a difference what screen reader you're using? Like for PC?
No, yeah, we're screen reader agnostic by design. So although there is a set of JavaScripts, and they're also free. I should have mentioned OSARA is free, and Reaper is very low cost. So yeah, it's not expensive to get started with this stuff. The things the JavaScripts do are essentially like shore up rough edges where we've coded to be as screen reader agnostic as we can and as kind of faithful to standards as we can. There are some situations where JAWS sort of looks at a control and goes, I'm going to do it like this instead. And so that's primarily what our scripter does. He also has done a lot of work on improving braille display support, which cards on the table, OSARA doesn't do anything specifically around that. So if you're a heavy braille user, the best experience right now is with JAWS and the free JAWS scripts.
Thank you.
Up to 85517 at report.ac.uk has joined the meeting alert.
Oh, hello. Someone joined. Any more questions?
A very quick follow-up. Are you saying you use OSARA and the JAWS scripts in combination, or you use one or the other?
No, yeah, so the JAWS scripts complement OSARA essentially. So the two go hand in hand. Like the JAWS scripts won't do anything on their own unless OSARA is running. And you can use Reaper with JAWS and OSARA without the scripts. It's just not as cool. Like some controls will behave a little bit strangely or report a little bit strangely, that kind of thing.
Thanks very much.
That's cool. Great. Well, thanks so much, Scott, for the presentation today. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
fascinating work, and looking forward to meeting you in person a little bit later on. Just like to thank you very much, and big round of applause.
Cheers, folks.
That's great. Thank you.